Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Wendy Schofer and Heather Awad. Thanks for joining us today, Wendy and Heather.
Thanks for having us.
Truly a pleasure every time.
Okay, yeah, you're very welcome. And by way of introduction, Dr. Wendy Schofer is a pediatrician, emotional health specialist for families, children, and professionals, founder of Family in Focus, speaker, comedian, podcaster, and ambassador for the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation. And I am too. I think we became ambassadors the same month together. So
Yes.
I think that means a lot to both of us. So, and Dr. Heather Awad is a family physician and a weight loss coach for professional women over 50, entrepreneur and CEO of Vibrant MD. And you also received a certification in medical acupuncture, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's fabulous. I love that. And today we'll be talking about the work that each of you are doing. And I like the way Wendy put it when she shared in our three-way messaging that each of us were finding our unique passions and ways to impact the health of our communities. So I love the way you said that, and that's true. So we're just going to be sharing your messages and how you're each doing that. So I always get started by asking what you'd most like our audience to know about you, and you can include hobbies, whatever you want. Wendy, would you like to go first?
Man, every single time I hear this question, I'm like, I don't know what it is today. It- I think that what this conversation starts up for me is thinking about how, I'm tickled every single time I hear that introduction because it's, for all the things that I'm doing that I have done, because it's been such an evolution. I would have never dreamt about this years ago. Like 10 years ago, I was like wandering around, lost, thinking I just was not cut out for this medical stuff. I can't seem to figure out how to do it. And now it's truly that part about finding what resonates with me, how I want to practice, practicing medicine, practicing in the community, creating, this coaching program, and really using passion and skills and just from the heart. I had no idea that this was even possible, and using improv as part of that. I mean, that's fun. That's just awesome. It's the icing on the cake. And so, yeah, I think that I'm here celebrating once again. I get to meet with friends and to be able to talk about all the businesses and the aspects of what we're doing because it's coming from the heart. This is us. I love talking with Heather and finding out what she's doing.
I'm also in a place I never expected to be. I had done many different things as a primary care doctor. I will say the one thread that goes through is that I was always a food as medicine doctor in primary care. If you had high cholesterol, I'd say, tell me what you eat for lunch. I did wound care in nursing homes, and so nutrition is actually very important. You need protein and zinc and vitamin C for wound healing. So that's always been there. But then now I really help menopausal women notice what pivots they need to make to optimize their nutrition, as well as what things they can do better that help them with weight loss. And some of that's cultural, and some of that's nutritional, and some of that's taking good care of ourselves, which Wendy and I both work on, people being kind to themselves and nourishing themselves. And so it's a great place to be. I'm super happy to be doing this work now.
Well, that's fantastic. I love that both of you have found joy in practicing medicine. So that's great. And we'll dive a little more into exactly what each of you are doing. And Wendy, when you and I messaged, you started out by sharing that your support of healthy weight in children is actually about supporting adults experiencing parental stress of raising a healthy family in today's culture. So if you would like to get started, share what you're doing and speak to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is part of that evolution. I thought that my role as a pediatrician was, to do all the monitoring, the prescriptions, prescribing how much to eat, how much to move, and families would come back. They're like, that does not work. You know, we're just having food fights. We're just banging heads all the time. I don't like to move. My kids don't like to move. Go figure. And so I was trying to figure out what was missing. And, you know, a big part of that was that parents were just stressed and trying to find a fix. They want to make sure that their kids are healthy, that they're doing well. And parents are running around trying to do all these things that everybody's telling them to do, you know, get involved with the electronics and how much they're moving and how much they're eating. It's also on top of everything else that parents are dealing with right now, because we can't put work and our relationships and all the other things on hold. So parents are chronically stressed. And the message that we keep on receiving as parents is, well, we just got to fix our kids. And that's what's creating those fights, that friction in the home, which, by the way, causes more stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I'm really looking at, well, how is it that I can support parents with addressing the stress that they're experiencing, the worries about how do I raise a healthy family? How do I do it without bringing in diet mentality? Or now, you know, with the risk of eating disorders and, you know, contributing to that different type of mentality. How can I do that and support parents to be the person that to be the parent that their child needs to navigate all of this? And so that's where I see my role as not in that role that I had before of like trying to identify the problem and fix it for the kids,
Mm-hmm.
but to support parents to be there with their kids through all of this. And at the heart of that, it's really the emotions that we're experiencing. Stress, by the way, is
Mm-hmm.
an emotional experience. What's the stress that parents are experiencing? Understand that, and then they can help their kids. I had a great example yesterday where a parent was like, I didn't believe in any of this stuff you were telling me about how, you know, I need to learn this first. She's like, I've never heard of this before. Feeling a feeling. I'm just telling my kid she should sit there and feel it. I had no idea what it felt to feel an emotion without going and acting on it. I was like, that's where it's our opportunity to learn what we never picked up before,
Yeah.
help ourselves to address the stress, and then we're in a much better place to help our kids address their own stress and to not make it about them having to change.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. And before I have Heather respond, I will say one thing that my last job for the last 7 years I was working was as a pediatric physical therapist. So I fully identify with what you're saying. And on top of that, and during the pandemic, right, parents of kids with special needs, not only did they have all of those stresses you were talking about and trying to school their kids at home, but then they were also expected to do PTOT, speech, reading, right? And all of that. And you can't even imagine the stress. So the one question I'll ask you is, how do you have time to address these things in your visits with the families?
You know, that's the question that everybody always asks. I just did a presentation with pediatricians last week about the role of emotional health in weight management. And this one very brave pediatrician says, I don't have the time for that.
Mhm.
And it's because we think that it's going to be kind of like opening up Pandora's box when we're talking about stress, when we're talking about emotions, because we have not done it before. And if we have not done it, we haven't practiced. I'm not even going to say we haven't done it well. We haven't practiced. I got to tell you, when you start learning to ask the questions, to just listen, to just even be there, there's nothing to fix. You're not opening up Pandora's box. You're just creating connection. In the office, that's
Mhm.
totally what I'm doing. With parents, you know, outside of the office, that's totally what I'm doing. It's also what I'm doing in my own home with my family and what I'm sharing with parents. Emotions are not to be afraid of. Oh, there's so much there.
Okay, thank you. I love the way you said that. Heather, would you like to speak to anything that Wendy said?
Sure. I think that, parents and, I work with a lot of parents who have older kids, but there's this whole generation that was not taught to feel their feelings or name their feelings, or, I get people and tell them it doesn't have to be fancy. How about stressed, sad, mad, glad, any of those, let's name it and notice how you feel it in your body. And people are like, I have never done this before. And I have a brother who has little kids, and they have like Daniel Tiger on TV who's talking about emotions. And I'm like, what is this? What a cool thing. Adults can feel emotions too. I totally agree. It changes the whole experience of your life when you do that.
And those Inside Out, those Disney movies are just as relevant for adults as they are for kids, right?
Yes, they really are.
Yeah, thank you. So, Heather, when we were communicating, one of the things you said is that you work with women to shrink the voice of the judge, using a positive intelligence framework. So, I know some of my other doctor friends also use the positive intelligence framework. So, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, sure. I get a number of women who come to me and say, I want to lose weight so I feel better about myself. Well, it turns out that both of these things can happen at the same time. We can work on nutrition and eating and um, all the things that you need for nourishing yourself, but also we start loving ourselves. And so we love ourselves all the way down. We love ourselves. We start that right away. The thing that people don't realize is that if they don't start caring for themselves, then when they get to goal weight, they still don't like themselves. So it's a separate track that you start. That's great to start right away. So we all have this voice in our head that says, "You did that terrible. You ate the wrong thing. You said something rude to the teacher, or you fought with your teenager and you're mad at them, and actually you're mad at yourself too because of what you said." But you beat yourself up a lot. We all have this. And in the positive intelligence framework, this is called the voice of the judge. And it's something you learned to survive your childhood. And it's fine, but it's like your gym shoes from when you were a little kid. They don't fit you now. You don't need it anymore. So they are thought loops. We have thoughts that are common, right? People will go to the mirror and say the same mean thing to themselves. Or if they mess something up, they'll have that same comment, "You're terrible," or some type of repetitive comment that they make to themselves that's mean. And so starting to notice those and saying, that is the voice of the judge, that is a thought loop I have in my brain. These are pathways in our brains that we can actually just let grow over with something else if we disrupt them. So we can notice them and say, gosh, I just said you're terrible again to myself. And I can say, that's the voice of the judge. I'm trying to not say that anymore. Or can I think of a kinder thing to say to myself about what just happened? And so you start to make a different groove. Like you think about going through the forest, and there's that path that's really clear that you go through all the time that says you're terrible and all these things. And little by little, you get a different path. So that voice may never go away completely, but people really say that, that got smaller. I almost never hear that again. And when I hear that, "You're terrible," I recognize it and say, "Oh, that's the voice of the judge." And so they don't um, take it so personally. And the other funny thing is that people think that voice is them and that they can't get rid of it. And so by kind of thinking and noticing that maybe this is a thought loop that I can disrupt, they're like, wow, I can be nice to myself. That voice is not me. Um, so I love the positive intelligence framework, especially for that work with the voice of the judge.
Well, thank you. And I think a lot of doctors learn that you're speaking to doctors who learned that through coaching, right? And there's a lot of doctors who don't have coaching experience, so they can take some information home from what you're saying. So, Wendy, before I ask another question, did you want to respond to anything that Heather said?
Okay, I love a good metaphor. I got to tell you, as you were describing, because we often talk about those well-worn paths,
Mhm.
and just even thinking about how we can just let it get overgrown by something else.
Mhm.
Because always thinking about, well, what happens to those well-worn paths? You know what? We've just got something else that is growing over it right now, and we're going to work on these other paths. So that just really resonated with me. Thank
Mm.
you. I might be borrowing that one.
Yeah, no, that's great to have a visual to take home. I like that very, very much. Thank you. So one thing I'd like to ask each of you is, so one thing each of you do is Wendy supports healthy weight in children and Heather supports healthy weight in adults. Lots of doctors will tell you to eat less and move more, right? And that's what they really think. So the things that you're saying, I feel like it's honest and comes from your heart as far as regulating stress and addressing that voice of the judge. And I think you really believe it, where there's probably some clinicians out there who might try to pretend that they believe that, but they really think, well, if they just wouldn't eat that Snickers bar, where they might not even be eating Snickers bar. Do you know what I'm saying? Like some doctors do judge their patients, right? Whether they do it verbally or actually, and I guess I won't give a personal example, but I had a relative who was sick and a doctor did say something to that relative, and they didn't really understand the whole story. So, did you always feel like that, or was there a process? So I'll ask you, Wendy. Like, did you used to think, well, if the parents would just wouldn't buy those Lucky Charms, was it an evolution for yourself?
Well, I'd say that we were all raised within this culture where we think that weight is a simple mathematical equation and that, you can somehow dial in exactly your weight and, exactly what it's meant to be. And if you're not reaching a goal or, succeeding, depending on who is defining this, that it's because you've got the math equation wrong. And that misses that we are not to be boiled down as humans to a mathematical equation. And I'm talking about the mathematics of calories in, calories out. Yes, there is truth in that. Okay. There is truth to that energy balance. However, we are so much more interesting than just stopping the conversation there. As humans, we are complex. And the complexity, I think the heart of really describing that is our emotional experiences. And there's a lot of things that part of our culture has just overlooked that. And so we have, this culture that says this is just the plan that you need to follow. We have a culture that says there's something wrong. It's a lot of stigma that's just baked in the culture at large. And that's reflected in our medical experience too. I think that there's a lot of things that I learned in my medical training that I am unlearning because I found that it doesn't help. Not that it's can't be some truth to it, but it's not helpful with the people that I'm working with. And so again, acknowledging energy balance. And yet, if I just stay with that, if I just keep on going, this is the plan you got to follow, I'm going to keep on hearing from parents how that doesn't work for them. How there's, the food fights, how they've tried that at home for themselves and it never worked. And if I just make a judgment about that, which is often, from other people saying, well, you're not working hard enough. You're not doing it right. Those are the biggest lies. And it's pushing people away from medicine as well as from just even having discussions about the health that they want to have and experience. And so, yes, I've unlearned a lot of things. I'm still evolving and I'm doing a lot of work with colleagues around weight stigma, weight bias, about how to communicate in medical settings to be able to build connections and understanding before we even talk about anything with changing a number on the scale.
Hmm. Thank you. That's terrific. Heather, if you'd like to respond to anything Wendy said and share your perspective as well.
Sure. No, I really agree. And I think sometimes the judgment too that came up is we had very little that we were taught, except for calories in, calories out. And so some of that, well, maybe you need to do a little bit more, is also us saying, I have nothing else to offer you from our medical training. Now we have new things in 2024, and there is a lot more there. The other thing I would say is that we've been taught the energy balance thing. And when you look at people who are in the menopause transition and beyond, it is true they need a little bit less calories in general going forward with their healthy life. But calories sometimes are completely irrelevant as well. In the menopause transition, I really would recommend that anyone who is helping women with weight issues at that time, that they look at the issue of insulin resistance that goes up at that time when your estrogen drops. Even if you take hormone replacement, you have more insulin resistance. So talking calories in and calories out is sometimes completely unuseful. If you look at people, if you ate the same on, let's say Monday and Tuesday, you had the same lunch and the same dinner exactly. On Monday, if you eat a sweet breakfast, if you have a muffin with sweet creamer in it, and then on Tuesday, you have leftover chicken and vegetables from your refrigerator, that's a savory breakfast. On Monday, your blood sugar will be higher all day long compared to Tuesday. So then all of a sudden you think, are those calories at lunch and dinner even relevant if my problem is blood sugar, insulin, and someone's telling me calories in, calories out, because I could have had less calories with that muffin breakfast. But actually, if I eat the savory breakfast every day, I will lose weight naturally, which I will not if I have a muffin every day for breakfast with sweet creamer in my coffee. So there's some of it's complex, and some of it just isn't helpful at all.
Yeah, well, thank you. I love that specific example that you shared. Wendy, do you have any specific examples from your work with families and how that's helped?
I'm going to say, in particular, I'm going to echo what Heather was just saying about the complexity because, I use the example with emotions, but, and she's using the example specifically of the hormonal complexity. And it's not either or. And I think that's really what we're getting to the heart of. So you're going to have the improv coming in here. It's yes, and there's so many different factors that are involved. And, a lot of the work that I do with parents is to slow down the entire process because, again, we are looking for a fix. And, in a lot of conversations, that initial fix is I got to fix my kid's weight. But the more that I can just help parents slow down and understand that it's not something where they're just going to suddenly feel like they're doing a better job at parenting because their child is changing, their weight, but to really understand what is really going on, the complexity about weight, the complexity of the stress that they're experiencing, of all the different factors that are going on without just coming to conclusions and creating issues because we're just trying to change the calories in and the calories out. It's acknowledging all of it and slowing down to really start getting curious and understanding.
Yeah, thank you. That's so important. So Heather, when you're communicating with your colleagues, so some of your colleagues wouldn't have the level of experience that you do with these things. So if they're other primary care doctors and don't have all this additional information, do you have some suggestions for them or where to start?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to look at the hormonal issues, I would say if you can just understand that when people's estrogen drops, that their insulin resistance goes up. So then doctors actually know quite a bit about things like metabolic syndrome and prediabetes, and some of that kind of science and nutrition stuff can apply then to the menopausal person. The other thing is, and I think most of our colleagues do this beautifully, is having grace for people and helping them be kind to themselves. If you can share a struggle that you're having, then they can share a struggle they're having. And really, if we're all nicer to ourselves, then we nourish ourselves better. When we're speaking mainly to ourselves, we don't feed ourselves well. When we're going in and walking about our day as if we are our own friend, then we're more likely to choose a healthy meal. So those are things that I would recommend for colleagues.
Thanks. And Wendy, how about from your perspective?
Oh, I heard in that totally about being yourself and being honest about how there is no perfection in this. And I mean, so much of the work that I do, whether it's with other physicians or with families or with my own, is saying it's not that I'm doing this work because I figured it all out. It's that I'm learning a language. And, just like, if you think about learning a foreign language, it takes some time, it takes practice. And even after you've been practiced, you're still finding that you stumble or you're trying to find different ways to do it. And I use the example of engaging with emotions in the office, in the home, as learning a new language. And yet, that doesn't mean that I've mastered my emotions. Okay, no, 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 no. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen, heard me describing, but I am in the front row of that roller coaster that's the emotional roller coaster all over the place. It's not that we've gotten to some place that is better than. It's saying, I'm here with you. I understand from my perspective. Let's see how, maybe you can create a broader understanding of what you're experiencing and what you want to do next. So there's a lot of autonomy in that as well by saying, we're doing this together, but yet how can I be of support to you?
I love that. That's great. So as we're winding down, I'll ask each of you if you have any final top tips for your colleagues or even any suggestions for patients who wish to support their doctors. Heather, would you like to go first?
Sure. Patients who want to support their doctors. I would say when things have gone well, it's okay to say thank you because doctors are stressed too, and so we appreciate that. And I've just been trying to show more gratitude to all the people in my life that help take care of me in all the different facets. I think people do appreciate that. Um, the anything else I'd like to say? Um, Really, I think nourishing ourselves. We live in a culture that does not nourish us. We live in a culture with a lot of highly processed foods. Um, we live in a culture that normalizes eating to get rid of our feelings. And thinking more about nourishing ourselves, eating foods that we enjoy that are real foods, and being kind to ourselves is is a very healthy way for doctors to go forward in the world, for our clients and patients to go forward in the world. So those are the last things I would add.
Thanks. Absolutely. And I love that you spotlighted those things. So thank you. And Wendy, how about yourself? Any other final top tips for your colleagues or any suggestions for patients who wish to support their doctors?
I think I'm like trying to go through all the possibilities I want to talk about here. But I would honestly say one of the biggest messages that I want to share with parents, and this is something that I want to emulate with other physicians as well, is that you're not broken. Your child is not broken. There's such a fix-it mentality that we have learned because whenever we see something that doesn't feel good or something that we're concerned about, we want to fix it to feel better. And really slowing down, which is another one I want to share, slowing things down, but to be able to see that it's not that we have to fix something, it's about understanding. And then the other part that I'm always looking for is what's working well. because we have to find a foundation of what is working. And at first, it seems really hard, but you just find the little gem. What's one thing that's working right now? And then it starts growing and growing, because the more that we focus on whatever evidence we're looking for, the more that we find more evidence for it. So you start finding one little thing that's going well, and you're like, oh, and so is this, and so is that. And so we're building upon it. This is also a positive psychology framework that it works. And so we're switching from a deficit model in the traditional medical pathways that we've been taught to finding what's working, what's going well, and let's build upon that foundation.
Hmm. Well, I love that. Well, thank you so much. We knew that we would find some synergy when we saw where the conversation went. And, when we're talking about either stress or the voice of the judge, we're talking to patients as they're talking to their, we're talking to doctors as they're talking to their patients, and you're talking to other doctors as they're talking to themselves, right? So so thank you for all the wisdom you shared. I loved having you both on. And did you have anything else to say?
I just want to thank you for having us, and thank you for having this platform. It's really beautiful. I enjoy watching you on LinkedIn, and it's a beautiful project.
And I love the way that you bring in different colleagues to be able to discuss different aspects. And so I thank you once again, because it is wonderful to connect with both of you.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much. And as you can tell, I absolutely love doing it. So, all right. So I'll end how I always do. And I say, in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices, and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.